It now drifts more than 22 billion kilometers from the world that made it. Alone, in the deep black. Ancient, silent, and steady. Voyager 1, a relic of human dreams, launched in 1977, long before we understood how far curiosity could reach. Built by hands now gone, guided by minds that wondered what waited beyond the planets. In an age before smartphones, before cloud computing, before the world was connected, this probe was humanity's message in a bottle, flung into the galactic sea. And now, more than 4 decades later, it speaks again. A voice from the edge of forever. A whisper through time and distance. It sent back a signal. Not just noise, but something new. Something no one was expecting. Not a simple status report. Not a dying machine's farewell. It was data. Real, raw, irregular. And within that data, something strange. Frequencies that didn't make sense. Bursts of energy where none should exist. A pulse, almost rhythmic. Structured, layered, intelligent. No known source nearby. No natural explanation. Scientists watched in silence as the numbers came in. They checked and rechecked, certain it must be an error. But it wasn't. The data was real. And it was impossible. It now drifts more than 22 billion kilometers from the world that made it, a silent ember sailing through a frozen ocean of stars. Alone, beyond the heliosphere, beyond the warmth of our sun's breath, Voyager 1 floats in the deep cosmic black where light travels for years and never finds a home. It is ancient now, by human measure launched when vinyl records still spun and satellites were rare dreams. It is silent, not because it is dead, but because it listens in a language few still remember. It is steady, gliding at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour, but to the galaxy, it moves like a falling feather. Voyager 1, not just a probe, but a message in a metal bottle, crafted by a species barely learning to walk among the stars. Built by calloused hands in dim-lit labs, guided by minds who dared to look up and whisper, what lies beyond the edge. It was born in 1977, before internet cables wrapped the Earth, before digital voices crossed oceans in seconds, before we believed we could touch other worlds. It was launched not just to study planets, but to carry us with it, a golden record etched with the sounds of Earth, the pulse of our oceans, the cries of our children, the mathematics of our minds, and the music of our longing. It flew past Jupiter, where lightning storms boiled like gods in anger. It passed Saturn, whose rings whispered the cold poetry of gravity. And then? It kept going. No more planets. No more warmth. Only the black, the real black. The black that waits outside everything. And then? More than 4 decades later. Just when the world had nearly forgotten it. It spoke. A faint signal, a pulse in the void, like the heartbeat of something impossibly far. It was weak, but not random. It wasn't just static. It wasn't just the dying gasp of a machine. It had shape. It had rhythm. It had intention. The scientists who caught it froze. They'd never seen this pattern. Not in Voyager. Not in any known transmission. They replayed it again and again, looping it through every filter, running it through AI analysis, comparing it to decades of telemetry. But nothing matched. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a solar flare. It wasn't even natural. What they saw in that data shook them. Not because it was loud, but because it was deliberate. There were layers, modulated frequencies like chords in a song, bursts of energy spaced like the pauses between thoughts. It felt encoded. But by what? And for whom? There was nothing near Voyager. No star within light hours. No known object that could emit such a thing. And yet, this signal had arrived, from just beside it. The signal kept coming. Not in a stream but in intervals. Measured. Patient. As though whatever was speaking knew we were listening. The team at Mission Control stopped sleeping. They lived in the data, living off coffee and cold silence, staring into a mystery that didn't blink. The signal was unlike anything Earth had ever received. Not radio. Not pulsar. Not quantum noise. It was more like a fingerprint, but one carved into time itself. Air systems began recognizing patterns, self-similar structures, recursion, fractals folded inside waves. Like a language made of echoes and reflections. It wasn't random. It was intentional. It responded. It evolved. As they changed the filters, the signal changed its rhythm, like it was adapting, learning, mirroring. At first, they thought, it's Voyager's systems malfunctioning, corrupted code. But Voyager's hardware hadn't been touched in decades. And then it happened. A sudden burst. One that lasted only 13 seconds. But in those 13 seconds, was a cascade of data no one could decode. Except for one thing. Inside that burst, layered in harmonics, was a tone. A chime? Musical. Organic. Like something between a Tibetan singing bowl and a whale song. It made no scientific sense. And yet, the tone repeated. And each time it repeated, it shifted slightly, moving closer to the frequency of Earth's own magnetic resonance. It was tuning itself to us. The researchers didn't speak for a long time. One of them finally whispered, "Something out there knows we're here." But the deeper they looked, the stranger it became. The origin point of the signal, it wasn't just beside Voyager. It was behind it. As if it had been following the probe for years. Hiding in the cold between the stars. Unseen. No visual data showed anything. No shadow. No reflection. But the signal persisted. And then it changed again. It stopped mirroring Earth's resonance. And began mirroring the human voice. Not words. But intonation. Cadence. Breath. As if it was trying to speak. Not in language, but in rhythm. Like a being without a mouth learning to hum. At first, it mimicked childlike patterns, simple repetitions, nursery-like tones. Then it grew more complex. Layered harmonics. Echoes that played backwards and forwards. Chords stacked like ancient choral songs. It was haunting. Beautiful. Impossible. The probe, built by human hands, was no longer just a spacecraft. It was now a bridge. Something, or someone, on the other side of the abyss was walking across. Not in ships. Not in machines. But in information. In sound. In signal. In symmetry. The scientists had no protocol for this. There was no chapter in the handbook titled, "When Voyager is contacted by an unknown entity."